Hello. Thank you, everyone. First of all, I'm very honored to be invited by Lawrence to attend this session. I just realized we have a lot of what I call big guns in this session, so I'm beginning to feel a little bit uncomfortable, especially when Shannon says I cannot wear a t-shirt. You know, when I started my company in 2018, I branded the company as a tech company so that I can wear t-shirts for major formal events, right? Because this is the first step towards sustainability. You only need to buy t-shirts, you don't have to buy suits, right? And especially when you put on weight, you change suits. T-shirts is cheaper to change. So this is not, there's a reason why I talk about this, because I feel in the world of sustainability, we were all too much focused on the form, right? All big corporates are so worried about being branded, greenwashing. And that is why, you know, suddenly sustainability consulting become one of the biggest business in the world, right? So no one wants to be like H&M. No one wants to buy carbon credits. And just because they worried about being branded, greenwashing. But should this stop people from trying to be sustainable? That shouldn't be the way. So we shouldn't be focusing on the form. We should be focusing on what you feel is right. If whatever you do is right, then you don't worry about people making claims on you of being greenwashing, right? So, well, I'm in the business of renewable energy certificates. It may sound a little bit foreign to many of you, but I think it's an important commodity and product that has the potential to drive new project development in renewable energy, and that leads to a lot more possibilities in terms of scaling up, you know, renewable power all over the world. So everyone must have heard of this in the news. Big, large corporates claiming, I am 100% carbon free. Maybe that's 20 years ago. In recent years, nobody dares to say I am 100% carbon free anymore, right? And it's hard to achieve 100% carbon free because in the world of carbon emission, there's this thing called scope 1, 2, and 3, which is the different types of emission. And to be scope 3 zero is a very complex process. And everyone who says that they are carbon zero for scope 3 will be challenged by someone else, right? Bracket competitors too. Yeah? So everyone is starting to move towards making a claim that they are 100% using renewable energy, right? So why is my title Achieving Net Zero with Legitimacy? So there's this group of companies called RE100 that is precisely trying to address this problem. And this large group of corporates called the RE100 are primarily started by the big brands and the hyperscalers, right? The data centers. And majority of their emissions comes from energy consumption, right? And a lot of these companies are focusing on using renewable energy. And why are they using renewable energy instead of carbon credits, which is similar but different? You know, I'll explain a little bit in my following slides. So, by making these two statements, I'm using 100% renewable energy versus I'm 100% carbon free, the real impact to the public is actually no big difference. But the way to execute it is hugely different, right? So the way I look at it, this is to use renewable energy is the first step that you need to take, that any company needs to take if they ever want to move towards the net zero strategy. So I use this slide a lot because Apple is a company that most people know, right? So if you look at this news article, it's in 2018. Apple says that they are 100% powered by renewable energy worldwide. So does it mean that they are installing a big solar power plant right beside their facility? The short answer is no, because that is why you build a grid, right? You build a grid so that all electricity go into the same grid and it gets redistributed to all the consumption. So the way renewable energy is being consumed, the fundamental of proving the origin of the energy is this concept called renewable energy certificates. So how does it work? So if you look at the picture on your right, talking about carbon credits, so what does it mean? Concept of carbon credits is an offset concept. So first of all, as a company, in your balance sheet, all the assets you're operating consumes energy, right? And you really does emit carbon through the operating of your business, right? But what do? You go to the other side of the world, you plant 100 hectares of trees, which absorbs the equivalent amount of carbon that you have emitted in this part of the world, and you get yourself net zero. So that is the basic concept. However, 94% of the carbon credits in the world are not removals, right? They are all avoidance. So I guess a lot of you have seen a lot of news about the recent African forests, Vera. So these are the type of concerns that is being brought about in the process of using carbon credits. It's still a great product. I personally feel it's a great product, but it's extremely complex, right? It's too hard for anyone, a man on the street, to understand enough to make sure that they are doing the right thing, right? So it takes time for carbon credits to happen. And then, if you move to the left, my favorite is called REDEX. So what is the difference between REDEX? I see 5 minutes, but I think everyone else exceeded 10 minutes, so I think I want to exceed a little bit. Because this is really important. I will cut down on my own break later. So REDEX, the concept of REDEX is not about offset. It's about tracing and tracking. So in a grid, you have coal power plants, you have gas power plants, and you have hydropower plants. They are all sending electrons into the grid. At the other side of the grid, you have a data center. And this data center consumes energy. There's no way you can track the particular electron that you're using. So that is how REDEX is being created. Every single renewable energy that is being generated goes through a verification and certification process that creates a certificate. 1 REC is equals to 1 megawatt hour of carbon-free production. So when you consume that 1 megawatt hour in your facility and you package it with a REC, then you are essentially telling the world that you are using that particular electron. So it really doesn't matter which electron that you're using. All it matters is the claims that you make on the number of megawatt hour of renewable power you use will never be more than the total number of megawatt hours of renewable energy that goes into the grid. So that is the big difference between renewable energy certificates and carbon credits. I must admit I'm not an expert in data center, and hence I did a little bit of research about data center, and I came across this from Europe. Maybe not so suitable in the Asia context, but it's a reference point. Data centers all data centers in the world are moving towards building sustainable data centers, right? There are many aspects to building a sustainable data center, and obviously, the lowest hanging fruit is to use renewable power, right? So in the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact, of which I think most of the branded data centers in the world are subscribed to it, 75% of the energy needs to come from renewable source by 2025. So how do they do it? In Europe and in the US, it's extremely easy to buy renewable energy because the infrastructure is well designed to enable renewable energy to be purchased via corporate PPAs. How about Asia? It's very, very hard, especially in Southeast Asia. So that brings me to the details of the next slide. Excuse me? Okay. So how do you build a net zero energy data center, right? Like what I've explained earlier is making a reference to the electricity to your data center. So the hydropower plant sends the electricity through the grid to the data center. At the same time, we go through a certification process on what we call the environmental attributes, which is a process to prove that the power is of renewable source. And the data center purchase the RECs on an equivalent amount of the electricity they consume, then they can make a claim that they are using 100% renewable energy. So I want to take the opportunity to comment on some of the things I've heard in today's session. First of all, I think this is one of the rare occasions I've seen government officials publicly acknowledging problems that they face. I've heard Mr. Deputy Secretary talking about, I was very intrigued by that, ESG, GSE. This is a big acknowledgement of issues. I haven't seen a lot of this in the big Western world's developed countries telling us their problems. I'm sure they have more problems than us if you look into the news on a daily basis, right? So I have heard a friend, a senior government official from a Southeast Asian country, told me, you know what, Genwi, 50 years ago, when the big developed countries today are having double-digit GDP per capita, using a lot of coal power, they didn't complain. They didn't say that they have a problem. Today, all the greenhouse gas that exists in the environment, 80% of them are contributed by the so-called developed countries in the world. And then you ask yourself, why are we in the process of developing our economies to become like them, have to bear the brunt of what has been contributed by these people who is coming back to us and say, hey, you're killing the world. How fair is that, right? I totally feel that we in the developing world, is doing a lot more right from the heart, that we want to do something to make sure that we're contributing to the world, right? I heard some presentations talking about walk the talk. We in this part of the world, I've seen, right, are really the countries that are walking the talk, right? Those so-claimed developed countries, if you go to them and tell them, hey, you know what, this winter, please switch off your heater because the climate change is real. Guess how many of them will switch off their heater? Just like people coming to us and say that, hey, you're burning too much coal, right? How about no electricity for you in Europe, right? So what I want to try to bring across the point is that I think in this part of the world, the developed countries, we are doing a lot to try to address climate issues. So please don't be ashamed about the fact that, we are not ready, trying to explain yourself out that, we are a bit shameful and all that. No, not at all, right? We're doing a lot more things than what you think you're doing, right? So back to this data center. So what is the concept? So how do we encourage renewable energy? In many cases, it's still more expensive, not on the construction cost, but on the development cost and the social cost of building renewable energy, right? And that's why renewable energy is not overtaking the world, even though the construction cost is so low as compared to coal power plant. The development cost is very high. The political cost is very high, right? So where to find this extra money to build renewable power plant and yet maintain the cost low enough so that we can continue to grow the economy? So that's where REDEX come into the picture, right? The electricity should be built and the electricity should be sold at a very economical price to the people of the country, and the REDEX should be paid for by the countries who wants to build facility in this country to atone their sins by paying a premium on the REDEX. To me, this is a way of returning the 80% of the greenhouse gases in the air. So REDEX has a very important role to play, right? Because REDEX in itself is the premium that you pay for the fact that it's renewable. We shouldn't make the local entities or the local companies, the local companies in all the developing countries are struggling, right? They're struggling because they have to bear with expensive cost of production. If you make them pay expensive cost of electricity generation, that's making it worse for them, right? So those premiums should be paid for by the corporates in the developed world who wants to try to build facilities in the country. I will talk a little bit about that. The concept of using REDEX to power up data center doesn't need to be 100%. Your data center might not be able to afford using 100% renewable energy. So what we can do is, some data centers say that our data center is powered with 10% renewable energy, right? So from a data center operation standpoint, one of the possibilities and the robustness of REDEX is the ability to fractionalize, right? We are able to track the electricity consumption by REDEX, right? So if we buy, that REC is the RECK REC, right? We buy REC to offset each REC of the electricity that is being used. So if you sell as a data center, if you sell by terawatt hours or gigawatt hours or terabytes or gigabytes, you can actually sell that particular REC in a fractionalized way to give your client who wants more premium to purchase RECs for their REC only, and the rest who are not so sensitive in wanting renewable power will be able to buy at a lower price, right? So this is an example to demonstrate to you how robust is REDEX as a product to enable data centers to thrive. That's all. Thank you.